Hey everybody, welcome back to Catechumens Depart. Sorry about the really unprofessional intro today. My wife Kim is on a work call, so I got to push start today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Eric Anderson.
Father Mark Kozak from the Assumption of the Holy Virgin Mary Orthodox Church in South Philly.
Good to be with you guys again today. Before we get started on topics, Father Mark, you are wearing a very fetching violet cassock
Yes.
today.
Well, see, I didn't know it was violet because red is not one of my colors.
It's not blue.
It's not blue. If it's not blue or black, then it's, I don't know what color it is. So we are in the post-feast of the Elevation of the Holy Cross, so which is a red time of the liturgical year. So I'm in my reddish cassock.
Ah, okay.
So
I almost asked you at lunch, but I didn't want to spoil it.
That's okay. I'm glad you asked it here.
Yeah, I thought people might.
It's a good question.
Okay.
It's a very good question.
We have... Did you get any questions from anybody this week?
No one has ever well, actually, that's not true. People have at church. No one has ever electronically directed a question towards me.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you see anything?
Nothing new. I still have the one from Lisa. Hi, if you're watching. I have that tucked away in my back pocket. Once we get, it's like a whole show though. It's not like
okay.
It's not a.
I thought it was a really hard one.
No, I'm not trying to spare you. I don't do that.
I know.
No, let's see. So no new questions. Otherwise, nothing new in church land. Nothing new for us. So. Last week we had talked more about the Christian story and more about the symbolism of the icons and what it takes to start to enter into the story of Jesus and Christianity more broadly. And I very rudely cut you off at the end when you started to...
We ran out of time.
We did.
And I forgot what I was saying.
And I didn't even look at what time we started.
Yeah.
So,
well,
look at that nice watch there.
Okay, I got it.
Okay.
All right.
We just, if I don't have my wife, it just right off the rails. No producer, no director. We're just going it alone today. We had begun to talk about what it might look like to be Christian in a post-Christian society and what our narrative and what our story in that context might look like.
Yes. And we really don't... Well, in some senses, we don't know how to do that. It's not that we don't know how to do this. We haven't really done this.
It's new,
but
right?
in some it's new, but in some senses, it's not. Mm-hmm. Under the communists and partially under the Ottoman Empire and under the Turks, we did some things in post-Christian societies. Mm-hmm. We made some, not the church, but the people in the church made some large errors on both of those sides. But then they maintained the faith, they did the services, they tried to keep the seminaries and monasteries opened. Mm-hmm. They had to have some relationship with the state due to practicality at first and common sense. And whether that was good or bad depended on which century that you talk about. Mm-hmm.
It was really interesting reading that Everyday Saints book. Mm-hmm. At some junctures, it seemed like pretty normal. I get normal. It was like, I grew up at the very butt end of the Cold War, and our idea of what was happening to Christians under the communist rule was like really bad. And then reading Everyday Saints, it sort of was like, it was bad sometimes, and then it was kind of not. They sort of seemed like at periods they worked out how to fly under the radar.
The church did work out some of how to function in a anti-religious post-Christian society. Of course, they had been there for 1,000 years, which helped a lot.
Yeah.
But they were, like I said, they were able to hold services. Did they have services everywhere where they needed to? No. Did they secretly baptize and marry people and secretly do funerals? Yes. Was there a underground church at times? There was. Was there underground church all the time during the Soviet period in the Soviet Union itself? No, there really wasn't. And the reason why is because the Soviets, they killed everybody. So you have to remember that between 1917 and 1920, 21, 22, 2/3 of the churches were closed. Over 100,000 priests, monks, and nuns and bishops were killed. By the 1930s, there were only 3 or 4 functional bishops in the Russian Orthodox Church. And then the Great Purges happened, and the enforced famine in Ukraine, 12 million people were killed, and many more people went to the Gulag. So the Gulag was populated by folks that were clergy people, and it would take another generation to. Is that okay?
Oh, I don't know what's going on. My computer just decided to do something weird. Sorry, guys. We've got
we have a little computer blow up.
We have a little computer. Oh, maybe that was just Annie visiting us and bringing us email or something. I think we're still rolling.
The dog brought email.
The dog brought email. She's like a little carrier pigeon for email. Thanks, Annie.
So, after Stalin died, who knew exactly what he was doing to the church, he did spend some time in the seminary. His mother wanted him to be a priest.
Oh, I've read that, yeah.
He ended up being a Bolshevik and blowing up things and killing 38 million people.
Which is a lot different than being a priest.
There were there were warmer periods where the church could breathe a little bit. It'd be like taking a couple breaths or two. And by the end of the Cold War, the church was taking more breaths. And it could function a little bit better. But nothing to the extent of what went on in pre-1917 Imperial Russia, and nothing to the extent of taking care of the people that they needed to take care of. Because after 89, when the doors were open, thousands and thousands and thousands of people came to baptisms and and chrismations and marriages and everything.
Yeah.
So
it's curious,
but
go ahead.
So
how does that sort of compare to like our situation, right? Because it's like that was a modernist project, right? The communist state was a modernist, rationalist project.
The communist state was a project that
we've like shot out the other side of whatever we are.
Somewhere in La La Land.
Yeah.
With a secular construct. Some of it's based on faith. We talked a little bit about this before. We have our own feast days. We have our own celebrations. We have our own saints. We have this. We have that. And
those are currently experiencing their own secular reformation now.
And they are. They're having we're having a reformation right now on who is American and who isn't American, and who was an American, who and so on.
Yeah.
But they had a tinge of the organized faith
Yeah.
here in America. To function in America under all religions are supposed to be equally treated equally, which is technically true by the Constitution, but not really true.
Right.
So
I'm gonna. But
much of that has gone by the wayside in the last couple of generations. So if we were to talk to someone in their 30s about faith now, we probably would get anywhere from "I'm spiritual but not religious," which I'm not quite sure what that means, because I usually have to ask them questions then about what they're talking about.
yeah.
To the other side of "I'm an atheist," and that's really rare. You usually can talk them down to being an agnostic.
Yeah.
Because there are very few atheists out there, and they're quite interesting people, atheists.
Yeah, it requires an enormous amount of faith.
But this being a product of the Enlightenment, of the Industrial Revolution that we talked about before, we have this post-religious society where you can have your individual faith, but that's not a 2/3 to maybe a half of the people in America may have an individual faith.
Yeah,
Even though the percentage people say 87% of the people believe in God, 10% of Americans go to church.
Right. It's sort of like what you do matters more than what you think. We were talking at lunch a little bit about the liturgy, right? And about learning the reader services and all of that type of stuff. And you were telling me it's like you learned it by doing, and then sort of then by later on the understanding of the structure and the more formalized. So it's like reversing that maybe doesn't work. It's like, I believe, bleh. I don't do anything about it though.
Well, there isn't a foundation, which is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
So
it goes back to that two-part world, right?
Yeah.
The divided, bifurcated, binary world.
So there's no foundation. There are no absolutes. There are no boundaries put on society. So if you belong to a religion, quote unquote, that has boundaries, then you're automatically in the bad zone.
Yeah, it's the weird paradox of we're inclusive of everything except something that's exclusive, and then we can't tolerate that.
Right. We can't say, gee, this particular faith group has a boundary and I can't tolerate that. Instead of saying, this particular faith group has a boundary, I respect that. Which is what it should be. That's what the Constitution implies, and that's how it worked in America.
Yeah.
Well, it was supposed to work that way.
It was supposed to work. I was thinking about that this morning, so let me backtrack a little bit on you and ask you, like, because you talked about, Christianity having been established in Russia as basically the sole religion for 1,000 years, right? So it seeps into the soil.
Yes.
Pretty much literally.
Yes.
And the importance of places, like even in our church, for example, right? Like our little church in Philadelphia has been there for what, 107 years?
107 years. You have to think that, 4 or 5 generations of people have been there.
Yeah.
Have prayed there. You can feel it.
Which is quite a long time.
Yeah. In America, it's quite a long time.
So I just have been thinking about this, and not to be like super pessimistic, right? I'm trying to wrap my head around it, is that this strange project of getting all of these things to coexist together, quote, equally, like, sometimes on my bad days, I'm like, that's not possible. Because, like, you read the Old Testament, and the direction to the Israelites was go into the land and drive out all the other gods, basically. And
don't worship those gods.
And don't worship those gods. And it's not that they're not, it's not like they're imaginary gods. Those are something. Don't worship them.
That's right. Don't do that.
Worship the true God. and the maker of all the other gods. And now we're in this weird place in America where we've tried to have all these things coexist. And Christianity, it seems like it would go in and it wouldn't forcibly take over, but by the correct kind of evangelization that we discussed a few times ago, it would achieve dominance. And sometimes through bad methods too, right? But there's always like a dominant religion. And now, like, we've tried to run this deal where there isn't at least not on paper, a dominant religion, but there still was a dominant religion. There was Protestantism in the United States. Like, and now we've kind of like shot out the other side of that. I guess I'm just kind of like brain dumping because I genuinely like don't know what to make of where we are. Like, because there's some days I get like super scared because I'm like, this is so weird. You know, people are burning cities down. People are terrified. They're angry. They have nothing. They think they've been told there's nothing, which is clearly not true.
Yeah, they've been told by various people, politicians and academics and some scientists and everybody that there's nothing.
Yeah.
But it's not like the church hasn't dealt with that before. We had nihilists in the 19th century in Russia and in other places.
Yeah.
And they didn't believe in anything either.
But they did lead up to the Russian Revolution.
But they led up to the revolution. Yeah. But here in America, I think.
Like, what do you see as the way forward for us in the church?
Well, the way forward for us in the church is to do what we've been doing. So we do the services, proclaim the gospel, do things in the community, use modern technology where it's appropriate. When someone comes in, smother them with food, and if we have 40 people at church, 39 of them will talk to you.
Yeah.
Invite them to come back to church.
Like that heals the person.
And we need to invite people to come to our church too. I went to Fuller many years ago. I was sent there by the OCA back in '83 to look at their church planting system.
Yeah.
And at that time, this was many, many years ago, 97% of the people that walked into church for the first time came there because someone else asked them.
It sounds about right.
And I think that basically is still there.
Yeah.
Now, do I think the 1/3 of the people that are churchless in America are all going to show up at church one day and if we ask them to come and they're going to remain there for the whole time? No.
Right.
But we have to first invite them there, and then we have to do what Jesus said. We have to love God with all of our heart, with all of our soul, with all of our mind, and love our neighbor as ourselves. And that includes each other. So we need to have good, solid, prayerful, worshiping communities. We need to have much more monasticism in America. It remains a hole that we have here spiritually.
Yeah.
I've said this many times to people that come to confession to me, and I think I've said it in sermons and in other places. I would like to send, my people to the monastery to spend some time there.
Yeah.
And at least experience the services there, and then take the next steps in their spiritual development. And we only have 2 monasteries within driving distance of us, and we need more. And
How do we cultivate that? That's something that Kim and I were talking about this morning. We were reading, I can't remember the names of the saints, but one in our Married Saints book. And they were talking about how this particular saint was like a pure and chaste and humble and like child. And I was thinking like, that seems like so far away, even that as like a goal, because it's like we grow up in front of the TV and now we grow up in front of the internet and we're catechized by those things. It's like, how do we develop the spirit where the idea of going to a monastery is even like a possibility, right? That's not, it's like, my kid's gonna go to college. Like, that's the automatic, like, maybe if you're like a dismal failure, you wind up at the monastery. I don't know, like, how do we start to think like that's like a super high calling? That's like a high goal.
It is, but it isn't.
Okay.
So, first of all, it's a matter of educating ourselves about monasticism. That it's not something to be afraid of. It's not something that's super rare in the church. I mean, we're the ones that started it in the 3rd century. We have the 2nd largest Orthodox church in the world. The Romanian Orthodox Church has in excess of 5,000 nuns.
And Romania is not big.
And Romania only has 22 million people.
Yeah.
The Russian church has many, many, many monasteries. The Georgian church has a number of monasteries in comparison to their size. They're about the size of numerically the size of Orthodoxy in America.
Oh, wow.
But when you've had a church for 1,700 years, then that's a little bit different.
Helps, yeah.
But I think the first thing we have to do is we have to talk about it. Then it has to become a choice for our people. So if young, Tommy Smith is interested in monasticism and learns about it in church school, and the priest talks about it, and his parents talk about it, and he visits monasteries as a child, and then all of a sudden he's graduated from college and he makes a choice to go there as a visitor to a monastery, and then he becomes a monastic. There's sort of an American twist to that. He has the freedom to do that. He's able to do that. But we don't educate, we don't talk about it. We don't talk very much about people becoming priests either.
No.
And it's, our priests come from people talking to the future priest and saying things like, well, you'd really be a good priest, or you'd be a really good monk, or you'd be a really good nun, or you have 6 children. It wouldn't be nice to have one of them become something in the church.
Yeah.
And I'm not like paraphrasing the Catholic Church in the 19th century and early 20th century here, or medieval Europe, where the second son always joined the church from the nobility, but that's where our people came from. Our monastics came from everyday people. Our first saint in America, St. Herman, was a regular guy. Our first bishop in America, St. Innocent, was a regular guy. He belonged to the clergy caste, but he was a regular person like you and me, except he was a saint. So what he did, as you said, was extraordinary. Yeah. And that was because of his spiritual life and his relationship to God, and he was a great leader of other wonderful people that spread the gospel. Saint Yakov and the first Native American saints, and then writing letters to Saint Nicholas of Japan and so on. I mean, his life is it's almost a textbook for being a missionary in the 19th century. But it's also a textbook for being a missionary.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm sort of...
And he was a regular guy.
Yeah.
He wasn't the son of an archpriest in a deanery, and he barely made it to seminary. He came from a very poor family. But the point here is that that's something we need to do. We need to have the services. We need to have the prayer life. We need to have the relationship with the community. We need to have education for ourselves. We need to have education for people that aren't in our church, that might be interested in the Orthodox Church.
Yeah.
And when you look at churches in America, these are the ingredients that they have. They had these particular ingredients, and they come together in vibrant, usually pan-Orthodox communities that excel in spreading the gospel. You hope you understood I didn't use the word successful, because that's a whole different, whatever that means.
That's a different paradigm.
But they become the spreaders of the gospel. So you ask, why did a particular parish do that, and then another particular parish didn't do that? Sometimes we don't know. Sometimes we do know. Sometimes all the ingredients weren't there. Part of the foundation wasn't there. And that's what you pray for. We pray for unity all the time, but part of the unity that we pray for, we think that's uniting the whole church. Well, that's also uniting the church, the parish,
Our
as
specific
a community.
church, yeah.
As a community. And uniting different people together that come from different backgrounds. We have churches. Our greatest missionary churches today are people in Mexico and Guatemala and in Africa, in Indonesia, and
Mexico and Guatemala, I could see, because there's a big Catholic presence there, so they would be. But Africa and Indonesia.
Yes, these are areas that are starting to grow in the Orthodox Church, and it's taken years and years and years of planting and working and everything else for these things to happen, so that the gospel can grow in a community, and grow in their particular way. This is another part of that Byzantine package that I talked about many moons ago.
Right.
That was given to Vladimir and Olga, but it was also given to the people in Africa and the people in Guatemala and the people in Indonesia. We have our first Orthodox bishop in Korea. It was given by Saint Nicholas of Japan to the Japanese, and so on. That package and the major products of the package are the gospel and holy tradition, and that's what we build this on. And we keep in line and focus on that. It's easy to focus on other stuff. Bigger is better. Why can't we grow? We ask all kinds of interesting questions. What do we need to grow? We need more this. And sometimes you don't need more this. You need to come to all the services.
Yeah, well, because you're distinguishing between success and efficacy.
And you need to, if you don't come to some of the services in a month, next month you need to come to another one.
Double up.
And you need to build that foundation. The person needs that, the individual Christian community needs that, and the church, of course, functions that way as a whole. So that hasn't changed per se. That won't change in Orthodoxy. So we won't bow down before secular authorities and say, Our liturgy is, our regular liturgy at Assumption of the Holy Virgin Mary is an hour and 20 minutes long. Oh, we can do it in under an hour, easy on a Sunday, no problem, we'll do that. Well, no. That's not what this is about. There's no reason to do that, number one. There's not, I mean, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Well, make things more accessible to people. Well, if someone is interested in the church, they're going to stick around for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And they're going to come down to coffee hour where they can ask questions about this.
Yeah.
That's what I did as a convert in 1976.
Yeah, coffee hour is like part of the deal.
You talk to other people about it.
Yeah.
You asked questions. Back then we read these things called books.
What? What are even those?
Yeah, you didn't go on the internet and learn stuff. You read books. You talked to the priest. If you can't find the priest, get someone that can find the priest. Okay? Because the priest needs to talk to people, and you need a full, as much of a full group of people to do services as you can. We've talked about that here at our parish. We need the priest and the deacon and the subdeacon sacristan and the altar servers and the readers and the singers and the choir director. And we need the people that are watching the doors, during the virus time, so people are at the right temperature, they're wearing a mask, and so on and so forth. All of these people are needed to have a service. And that's like 20 people.
Which is great, because then that also breaks the consumer mindset.
Right.
You're a participant.
Right. So you come in and
you're a member of the body.
Right. And if you have a talent, if you have a talent, I look at people and see what talents they have. And, I'll ask them point blank sometime, or I'll be a little bit more indirect and say, you have a talent, which is a foundation, to do such and such. And we really need someone to do this. Like, we need someone to do this for a long time. And become a member of our community. It's community-based.
Well, and people are dying for that. I mean, people were isolated before this virus, and now, I mean, people are so lonely. And that's the wonderful thing that Kim and I have found, certainly becoming part of the church, is that it's like, there's your home, right? That's the cure for that loneliness in a lot of ways, or that rootlessness, or that isolation, or that divided sort of compartmentalized Western way of being. How are we on time anyway?
I think we're about a half an hour.
We've probably...
Can we tell?
Can we tell? Let me look. Oh man, this is like...
We might have gone over. Sorry, everybody.
Oh gosh, they're super tight. We're 3 minutes over, Father Mark.
We're 3 minutes over. Oh my! Oh,
everybody just immediately tunes out.
I know everybody tuned out. Sorry, everybody.
Well, let's pause there.
Okay.
And we'll pick up again next week. I think that was really good. That was good. That was a lot. I have to chew on a lot of that.
If anyone is looking at this that's interested in the church, come to church and ask questions.
Yeah. That's what we did, right? It seems super weird.
I did that at 19.
Yeah.
After the hippie revolution and after Vietnam had just ended.
Yeah.
Look,
which we might see a lot of in a year or two.
And my life totally changed.
Yeah.
It totally changed because of it.
Yeah. I mean, same. I don't have all these like heavy metal tattoos for nothing.
I don't have
You don't have any heavy metal tattoos?
No, I didn't get any of it. I didn't get a sailor tattoo either. So.
Ah.
Oh well.
Well, thank you, Father, as always.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure to visit with you. Thank you guys for joining us. Hope you learned something this week. I certainly did. We will see you next week. And I'm really gonna upset the subdeacon. This week I'm gonna say, until next time, catechumens depart.